Welcome to All Things Chiropractic.
Well, welcome to another episode of All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
And I'm Dr. Mark Davini.
So today, we're going to talk about what's changed now that the dust has settled. And we're talking about that humongous, ginormous, huge data breach from Change Healthcare that happened last year, at the beginning of the year. Those that are impacted know what I'm talking about.
It's probably just a few of you out there that are listening to us that know what we're talking about. But for those few, we'll continue to talk about the largest breach in history.
Yeah, it was massive. It was spectacular in a negative way. But let's just do a little recap of what happened. So Optum, which is...
Oh, wait a minute, Paul. Let me just jump in. Explain to me why I care about UnitedHealthcare having a breach when I might not even be participating in UnitedHealthcare as a provider.
Well, doctor, UnitedHealthcare is humongous, and among their assets is a company called Change Healthcare. And Optum, you probably, some or if not all of our providers know about Optum. So Change Healthcare is a management cycle service that connects payers, providers, patients within the U.S. healthcare system. Why do we care? What does that mean? Well, for us end users, our chiropractic offices and the like, your electronic claims clearinghouses were using the services of Change Healthcare to help disperse claims to the appropriate carriers. So maybe that's a revelation. Maybe you didn't know that.
It's an absolute revelation because that's what I thought a clearinghouse did.
Yeah.
So now you're telling me I have a clearinghouse for my clearinghouse.
In essence, you do. It's like Change Healthcare was business to business, and then your clearinghouse is business to consumer.
Can't make this stuff up.
You know, because I used to deliver newspapers back when newspapers were a thing.
Whoa.
A long time ago.
Whoa.
Right? So
news and paper, both of them together don't apply anymore.
The newspaper delivered to my residents stacks of papers, in which I delivered to people who used to read the newspaper. So Change Healthcare handles the claims routing for clearinghouses, and the clearinghouses are the ones that provide you the service to be able to do that. So that's why we care, because boy, did we care back in February and March
of 2024.
And the reason we cared the most was because we couldn't get paid, right? We would submit claims to our clearinghouse and they would all pend because Change Healthcare interruptions occurred. So
But we were involved with UnitedHealthcare, Change Healthcare, and we didn't even know that we were partners with them, most of us.
No, like most things, right? You don't know, if I've got a cell phone and it's through a big carrier, that's my relationship. Who they use to help provide that service, unbeknownst to me, I don't really care unless I can't use my cell phone.
Exactly. But it was. And when you said this might be a revelation, I could say that most of the people I talked to, it has been a revelation to them, that there's this intermediary that is between our intermediary.
And so let's talk about that, because we'll give the background, but I'd like to talk about the scope and breadth of the impacted services. It was huge. We talked about electronic claims, but it didn't stop there. There was online verification of benefits through your carriers' portals that were interrupted. Your electronic...
You mean my non-United healthcare carriers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you here in Massachusetts, Blue Cross Blue Shield got interrupted, and you couldn't verify benefits through their portal because they were using Change Healthcare as a backbone for them.
You mean in violation of the No Surprises Act?
I don't know about that, right?
Yeah. We're supposed to verify benefits,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh, I thought you meant surprise, you can't verify benefits.
Yeah. No, the Surprise Act was that they were even involved.
Yeah. That was a surprise. And then other things like electronic remittance advices, right? So your electronic EOBs and files to import into your EHR record and stuff. But also stuff that chiropractors we don't really deal with, which is e-prescription services. So imagine you're on
Insulin.
Yeah, insulin. Something that you need, and that's all interrupted. Dental claims, they got hit hard too. And then even the prior authorization systems.
I mean, it took a bite out of their income.
Oh, you heard it, folks. It wasn't for me.
Ouch.
So we're talking about just a myriad of things that we rely on day to day in the healthcare system that just stopped, and then started to come back online slowly when we look at what happened, right? So what happened to cause all this, we can look to back in February of last year, there was a breach. Now, for those who don't know that magic word, I'm going to let Dr. Davini explain a little bit. What is a breach in this context?
It means that someone had access to information and they're not supposed to, and they take that information and they may do something nefarious with it. So in the world of compliance, we're talking about protected health information, PHI, protected. So when somebody has access to your protected health information, it could be as basic as your name and address, but it could be social security numbers, it could be your healthcare numbers, it could be your health condition, your treatment, your restrictions and limitations, your disabilities, any and all of that, social security, all of that is considered part of your protected health information. So when someone breaches a database that has access to that information, they pretty much know who you are, and they take that information and they can create a false identity using your information. Now they put credit cards in your name. They go buy houses. They go buy cars. They take or empty your bank accounts, or they have access to everything. Because let's face it, the world is all online.
Boy, is that true, right?
Mm.
So what happened? Back in middle of February of 2024, there was a breach. There was a Russian ransomware group. They're the ones claimed responsibility.
Yeah.
Alpha V Black Cat is the one. And they were able to penetrate Change Healthcare and skim data, all that PHI. Now you think about, okay, doc, what's on a claim form that I submit electronically that could have been exposed? What kind of data is there?
God, again, name, address, carrier information, diagnoses, treatment, payment information. I mean, all of this just is sitting in your claim form, who your carrier is, all of that, dates of injury, all of that kind of information, who provided the service, NPI numbers, types of service, all of that sitting on one page alone, let alone the other information that they could have once they have access to that information.
Yeah, it's a dramatic amount of information that one could use in a sinister way that's just sitting on a claim.
Oh, and it's funny when I think about it, and sometimes we get complaints get calls from doctors, and they go, "Oh my God, I had a breach," and "Oh, all right, tell me about it. What do we have to do? Where do we go from here?" I said, "Well, I created a super bill for a patient, and I sent it to the wrong patient." And when you compare it to the depth and the breadth of this breach, it's almost comical that we have to worry about stuff like that, and they breach the information of how many people? Millions, right?
Over 100 million.
Over 100 million people. So in our little world, we always have to look through that we have that tunnel vision where we put everything in our perspectives and our scale. But when you think about something this large and how it affected so many people and how it may still affect them in the future because that information's out there.
It is.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So for about 3 days, February 17th to 20th, this data breach had exposed PHI in all different areas, as we talked about. And the funny thing is, when you look at the notice from Optum about this, it was like, well, some services are currently unavailable. We're trying to triangulate the problem. We apologize for the inconvenience. And then later on in the same day, on the 21st of February, they're like, we have a network interruption. We expect it to last at least through the day.
Yeah, tell me something I don't know.
The day. They clearly didn't understand the scope of the data breach at that point.
And they released that at 2:00 in the afternoon. So through the day, we're already through the day.
Yeah. And so a week later, then they come out with, there's been a cybersecurity issue. There's been a cyber crime. And they even name who possibly did it. And then the whole month of March goes by, not much happening as far as...
Except you're not getting paid.
Yeah. There's no information coming about where's the fix. But there's a whole lot of pending claims and inability to verify benefits and all kinds of stuff happening, right? And then they recognize, and then they give a notice on the 22nd of April that says, hey, we've identified some screenshots and PHI that might have been exposed. But, from their notice, my takeaway is that they were trying to, minimize the exposure that could have happened, as any company would, I guess.
Again, making this sound like I just spilled my coffee.
Yeah, right. And the funny thing is, then it jumps to May 7th, with the same sort of notices in between. And then they claim on May 7th that the incident has been resolved.
Yeah. Now, if you were to tell me it was resolved, I'm just sitting out there with my information that was just compromised. Resolved to me means you got my information back and there's no way anybody has access to it anymore. And that wasn't true, was it?
No, I think they were really talking about we resolved the penetration issue and we've resumed our services.
Right.
Mostly.
They didn't resolve the problem.
No.
They just stopped the problem and let's continue on from here. But don't worry about it.
Yeah.
All your stuff is out there, but don't worry about it. We're all good. They have so much information on so many people. You're probably never going to be affected.
If you read between the lines, I guess.
Yeah.
But what was really eye-opening, not just learning the back-end process of what was going on with clearinghouses and all these related services to servicing healthcare patients in the United States, but also that there were a lot of eggs in one basket. So through that time, there were a lot of workarounds that started to happen. Clearinghouses were feeling the pressure from their customers, and so they worked around the Change Healthcare, discontinuing of services during that time. And you were able to verify benefits through clearinghouses now. And most of them that I've seen, they haven't changed that. So whether they've resumed with Change Healthcare or they're using their workarounds, a lot of clearinghouses now, you can go there to perform some of these services where before we're going over to the carrier websites.
But again, we never knew they were there in the first place. So is that something maybe we should be asking? Am I the workaround or am I still connected to Optum Change Healthcare?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure we get all the answers to that, right? But what I do know is that the workarounds were very welcomed. Some carriers were quicker to handle workarounds to allow the clearinghouses to resume claim submission than other carriers. Some carriers, they extended their timely filing limits based on this huge interruption. Optum themselves were offering advanced payments based on your volume with UnitedHealthcare claims, and it didn't seem to be a ton for the end chiropractor, but it was really just a loan in a sense, with a prepayment. I don't know. It was weird. I didn't really look too much into it other than, okay, it didn't mean a lot for a lot of our chiropractic end users. So I was like, eh.
Yeah. Then they said that they upped their security so that this won't happen again. And I look at it and go, why did it happen in the first place? You're talking about this huge, huge company, not somebody with just a little firewall on their desk. But they have millions and millions of dollars probably dedicated towards security, and they were breached. And now they're telling us they fixed it. It's resolved. It's like, well, why didn't you do that in the first place?
Yeah. Well,
where's your security risk analysis that we ask everybody to do on our little systems, where we have to make sure that our systems are safe and secure? Why isn't that? You didn't do a penetration study. If someone could break in, maybe that's the person you should be paying first to see if it's possible. Obviously it was.
It's funny, in looking at statistics, let's bring it to our, private practice chiropractor. Do you worry about data breaches in your office or someone penetrating your network, getting through the internet and think about what's on your computers, what's in your EHR, whether it's cloud-based or local server, you're using Word documents to send letters, whatever it might be. I'm looking at stationx.net and they show that the data breach growth trend continues. Can you take a guess globally in 2023, what were the intrusion attempts on businesses? It was a lot.
Millions.
Think more like U.S. deficit.
Oh,
7.6 trillion intrusion attempts.
And growing every day.
That was up 20% from 2022. Could imagine what 2024 is going to bring us. And so,
well, this is why we talk about it. Even in with our compliance people, you probably laugh and sit back and recognize that one of the questions asked every month is, have you had any breach of protected health information? And hopefully the answer is always no, but you do get the yes occasionally.
And for our listeners, if you think it won't happen to your small business, let me give you a real story. This was years ago. This was probably at least 10 or 15 years ago. Probably more than that, 20 years ago. Working for a chiropractor as a CA and working on the billing software, and the computers just kept shutting down. It was super annoying. We're like, what is going on? The computer keeps shutting down. Called the IT guy, he showed up, looked at the server, and he's like, well, your router, which is when the internet comes into your office, it gets routed through a router, right? And a modem. Bore you with technical stuff, but he said it keeps shutting down. Your router keeps shutting down. And so he starts looking into it and he goes, whoa, you're getting port scanned, which basically means there's a bot out there and it's trying to get into your network. It's all automated. This was years ago too. It's trying to get into your network because once it gets in through a door or a window, then like a burglar in your house, they can have at it. So he said, your router's actually doing its job. It's shutting down. So every time we keep restarting it, it keeps shutting down because it's getting attacked. Do you know where that port scan was coming from? He could trace the IP back.
He told me before, but I'm not going to say it out loud.
Right. Come on, tell him. It's
China.
No, it wasn't China. It wasn't China. It was Tehran, Iran. Can you believe that's where it was coming from? Tehran, Iran.
Oh, surprise.
So, and this is just a small business in a small community, in a small town, in a state.
In a galaxy far, far away.
And I'm like, whoa, you got to be kidding me. I took screenshots of it. I was like, this is amazing, and in a not so good way.
But, a long time ago, we all had computers, of course, but we didn't think of them as having the vulnerabilities that they have, and that, like you say, trillions worth of intrusions are being attempted all the time. But now, if we're saying words like external firewall, modem, router, malware, ransomware, if any security risk analysis, if any of these things don't sound familiar to you, you need to pay attention a little bit more to your security. Something we'll talk about at a future podcast.
So again, if you're still one of those people that says this is not going to happen to me, like I'm a little player in a small town, this isn't it. That same Station X shows the volume of data breaches from January to April of 2024. Do you know what the average monthly exposed volume of data breaches? Now, this we're talking about breaches. We're not talking about attempts.
Yeah.
Actually, breaches. Average monthly was almost 9 billion.
Wow. And, this stuff isn't little. I'll give you an example of a breach, a couple breaches actually, but one of them was that Leahy Clinic here in Massachusetts had one of their laptops stolen out of the X-ray department. Just the laptop. Had 500 names in it, just 500 names. And of course, it was secured. And they were fined over $600,000. And this was, 7-8 years ago now, which is way more money today, right? So $800,000 fine for that, for losing that laptop, for failing to secure it and failing to make sure that it was safe and all of this other stuff. And how many laptops do you have in your office? How many phones do you have in your office that are now more powerful than probably that laptop that was stolen? So you have to recognize that this stuff happens, and it happens in ways that can be very impactful to you. You probably have more than 500 names on your office computer. And what would the fine be if that was taken? So you have to take this stuff seriously. We're not talking about something in the ethers or the vapors that will never touch you. First of all, it has touched you, right? Impact your income.
Oh, yeah.
And it possibly could have impacted your database of patients. It has. I mean, it's out there. It's whether somebody uses it or not. We're so dependent on tech now more than ever. If you've listened to our AI podcast, you'll know that that's only going to get worse, not better, as time goes on. So my question, Paul, can you survive a shutdown? How long can you tolerate a shutdown in the most average office?
Well, I guess that depends on what types of procedures you have, or I would have, right? Because there's plenty of offices now, right, where everything's online or through the computer, the schedule. Let's think about that, right? If I walk in the morning and there's no power or no internet and I can't get to my schedule, do I know who's even coming in that day?
Let alone if they have co-pays, whether they're insurance, whether they're self-pays,
Call it a surprise.
Surprise. The Gomer Pyle method of practice. Surprise, surprise, surprise.
But okay, even and I don't have any, we went paperless, right? So we're using EHR like we've been told and taught, and the efficiencies that come with it. So, okay, if someone walks in the door and, here's Paul Andrews coming in to see Dr. Davini. If you didn't have a chart that was accessible, would you be able to see me that day? Would you treat me that day?
Great question, right? Because we all know that you can certainly adjust somebody most of the time just based on your findings for that day and do what you do. But how many of those patients in the course of your day, based on how many patients you see, right? But how many patients in the course of your day might have something going on that you need to know that impacts not just what you adjust, but how you adjust, or whether you would adjust at all? So that information is in the record. So if you were to ask me personally, I would say no, because I feel that most patients would totally understand that if I don't have access to their record, I can't treat them, and most of my patients probably wouldn't want me to without the record in front of them. But I know others might have different opinions in that area, but for me personally, I'd say thank you, sorry, not my fault, let's reschedule.
Do you think that there's a relationship to your opinion of the value of a record versus that would prevent you from treating that patient versus not?
I do. And I will say that as a profession, there seems to be this general attitude that the profession is an annoyance, but not a necessity. And I can tell you that when I practiced, it was a necessity and not just an annoyance.
Right. So this is our members moment portion of the podcast. And this is where we talk a little bit about some of our members' needs throughout this, if I recant the needs through the breaches. And there was a lot of stress and concern. And it started to grow week after week when they couldn't submit claims. They couldn't verify benefits. There was a lot of stress. And we know stress has a huge impact on our mental health, our physical
Number
health.
one killer.
Yeah. So we were, if anything, we were just, cheerleaders for our members.
Yeah, talking them off the ledge.
Yeah. And then as we started to see some workarounds with different clearinghouses, even though it's not a small deal to change clearinghouses, as anyone who's gone through it, there's a lot of EDI enrollments. It's kind of a pain. But when you're facing no resolution in sight, and then we offer a clearinghouse that has found workarounds, a lot of people were jumping into a different clearinghouse, and I don't blame them. I would too. And then knowing that some of the carriers had published extensions on their timely filing because of those problems, it started to soften, even though it was still a pain. And probably the biggest lingering issue we saw relative to chiropractic was the verification of benefits function. That was just taking forever to resolve. But clearinghouses, again, became sort of these little mini champions by finding workarounds for claim submission, allowed them to find workarounds for verification of benefits too.
Right. Go through a little bit of a mental exercise. I think we've all had moments in our practice where we lost power or maybe lost lights or whatever, and we can practice without any of that. But I want you to go through the mental exercise of practicing without the internet for a day and try and actually come up with backup plans to what would you do? Like we mentioned at another time, maybe print out your schedule for the next day the previous night as one of the last things you do. But what is your workaround? What is your backup plan? What is the contingency for if you walked into the door the next day and there was no internet?
Right, because your staff would just want to turn around and go home. But
if they could even find the office by that point, because the GPS isn't working.
Yeah, right. Yeah, where is it? Exactly. Yeah, so, only one of us in this room can remember when there was no internet, because I'm so young, I wouldn't even know what you're talking about.
I remember when there weren't any computers, so, where does that go, right?
or cars or motors or,
Yeah. You mean the horseless carriage.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, they got talkies now in the movies, do they?
Yeah, that was a big day. Big day. Yeah.
So where does that leave us? We could talk a lot more about it, but, why dig up such awful things of the past, right? Any words of wisdom, parting gifts?
Well, I think you already said it earlier. Truly, the best thing is not to put all your eggs in one basket, to make sure you have contingency plans. Don't make everything go through one thing or be one thing, because what we've learned today is it's all very vulnerable.
Boy, is that true. Well, on that somber note, thank you so much for listening to All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
I'm Dr. Mark Davini. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to All Things Chiropractic. We'd love to hear from you. Visit allthingschiropractic.com with comments, episode ideas, or questions. Or connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at All Things Chiropractic Podcast. Be sure to join Dr. Mark Davini and Paul Andrews next time for another episode of All Things Chiropractic.